Joe Rogan and Donald Trump share connections beyond their pop culture circles, particularly through ties Fertitta and Maceo family. The Fertittas, prominent in both business and entertainment, Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, known for their time as owners and CEOs of the UFC, brought the organization and appointed Dana White as president, who in turn hired Joe Rogan to be lead commentator. And their ancestors' activity in Las Vegas is well documented in classics like The Greenfield Jungle and archived on Bleacher Report articles. Get to reading this stuff before it's gone, folks. Although most of this information can be compiled from readily available sources, like I'll show you here. The Fertitta family's influence traces back to their marriage into the Maceo family, who once led the Galveston mafia in what was known as the Free State of Galveston. The two lead brothers, Sam and Rose Maceo, were the influential crime figures behind this operation, and they gradually passed their influence to the Fertittas. Both families also became early investors in Las Vegas, with Sam Maceo famously aiding Mo Dalitz in securing permits and political connections, leading to a stake in the historic Desert Inn on the Las Vegas Strip. You can get Kimber Fountain's book on the Maceos, albeit a sanctioned publication by the family, at their sandwich shop in Galveston. Momster Nostalgia sells, and I'm guilty. And their sandwiches are good, as is their imported balsamic vinaigrette syrup. Another Fertitta, Tilman Fertitta, is a major figure in Houston as the owner of the Houston Rockets, Landry's, the Golden Nugget, among other ventures. The Maceos additionally founded the pageant of Pulchritude, a swimsuit contest in Galveston that gained national fame and later inspired the Miss USA pageant. This event links Trump and Maceos with only a few degrees of separation, closer than a typical game of 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So with that initial setup, let's get into some deeper connections. I am from the suburbs of Houston, so this episode might not be very smart. My uncle, who I also share a middle and last name with, drew the logo for the Houston Rockets used during the 1990s, before Tilman owned the team. I wear it on the channel because of the synchronicity of diving into Shakespeare research and finding the writer Thomas Nash could have also been involved with Shakespeare, but that was years after this story. In 2012, while driving to Galveston with my grandfather, he shared an intriguing historical fact. The city was once the largest red light district, and I was kind of taken aback by this revelation, as Galveston is generally perceived as rather shabby and unimpressive compared to other beaches. This sparked my curiosity and led me to explore the Free State of Galveston, a time when prostitution, drinking, and gambling were permitted, unlike in the rest of the state and country where such activities were largely hidden. Galveston was the original Las Vegas long before anyone ventured into that arid desert. It boasted high-end entertainment featuring legends like Frank Sinatra, cutting-edge restaurants, exceptional hospitality operations, and a place to enjoy a drink during Prohibition when the rest of the nation was dry. This was made all possible by the Sicilian brothers Sam and Rose Maceo, among others. Leveraging international connections, World War I acquaintances, and a relaxed approach to prosecution on the island, the Maceos initially operated under-the-table drinks at small soda shops. They later invested in larger assets to sustain their operations, likely collaborating with other clans, including those in New Orleans. There were shootouts, racketeering, potential narcotics ties, and even incidents where some Fertittas assaulted life reporters in 1955 during their investigation. The typical mafia antics. Yet somehow this history fades from memory. The older generations may not effectively pass these stories down, or perhaps the youth are too distracted by the NBA game or the UFC fight to care. Roy Cohn, Donald Trump's mentor and notorious figure from the McCarthy hearings, also has connections to the Galveston scene. A 2009 Nation article details some of Cohn's and Galveston scion Sharon Moody Jr.'s sordid activities, which evoke a P. Diddy-like aura, or themes from the revelatory podcast The Clown and the Candyman, not only in content, but also in their proximity to Houston. Moody, in addition to facing legal trouble for embezzling his family's fortunes, was accused of witchcraft due to his ties with the Order of Saint Germain, a rabbit hole far too deep to cover here. And of course, there are the JFK rumors, not to discredit them. Moody may have even been involved in funding the Bay of Pigs, and the connections just never seem to end. Cohn himself seems to be cut from the same cloth, known to use sexual blackmail. This is the man who reared Trump. Is any of this a coincidence yet? Trafficking humans, often children, in the political circles. Is this not the Jeffrey Epstein's debacle as well? Blackmail and sexual extortion to control politics? There's also plenty of rumor and suspicion of Melania's history. Trump bringing Miss Universe to Russia, relations to Epstein and Adnan Khashoggi. This provides a lineage directly also to the pageant of pulchritude run by the Maceo family. Small world. Or is it? Not to even mention the McCarthy Senate rabbit hole and their use of Nazi intelligentsia, the quasi-CIA group known as The Pond, led by boxer and OSS vet John Frenchie Grombach and his later ousting by Alan Dulles. Further connections to the military intel can be explored. Joe Rogan and Alex Jones are connected to the company called Disinformation, which is connected distributing conspiratainment, but also connections to military intelligence, specifically through Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino. Military papers detail the use of truth as a weapon to be distributed to the masses in a controlled fashion, from talk radio show hosts to comedians. In fact, there was deeper connections between comedians specifically and the alternate truth community. The Zapruder film of JFK infamy was pushed in front of the masses by Dick Gregory. Bill Hicks was involved with showing a different angle to the Waco siege. Each of these instances align with tactics outlined by the military and psychological operations of controlling truth.
We have the zeitgeist. If you wanted to use an allegory, InfoWars has pulled the sword Excalibur. Others can't pull it. We pulled it. Trump pulled it. You pulled it. But if you don't use Excalibur, it's worthless. I am using Excalibur. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes or stumble or fall. Or at the end of this, not make it myself. But the new republic, the rebirth, will be launched. That's what it's all about.
All right.
Boy, you know, Scott Adams, CNN is losing the mind war.
A link to a longer expose on the psych warfare angle to this topic will be linked in the description. I highly recommend you watch it. Tilman Fertitta has been depicted as a shrewd and craft businessman who seemed to come out ahead after the savings and loan crisis while others suffered. Just keep punching, he says in his book. Just keep buying. Somehow it'll work out. Maybe if perhaps Tilman also owned federally insured banks that were reimbursed, leniency on his loans, and a cousin involved in the law who can help navigate legal troubles, as detailed in Pete Bruton's The CIA, the Mafia, and George Bush, talking about how the savings and loan crisis had mafia and military money trails. Fertitta family still finding themselves in the mafia environment. So I find Tilman's claim of self-made to be a bit pampered. Hard being a gangster, fleecing Americans, distorting truth, pushing narratives, illicit depraved activities like sexual blackmail and trafficking, political influencing. Also, is it not a conflict of interest to own major sport franchises and major gambling establishments? Isn't that the mafia wet dream? And what's that old saying? The house never... what? The name of the game is to go legit. When your name is on stadiums and campus buildings, charities, and fundraisers, people tend to assume the best. I brought this all up at Swarm Tank, a live interactive audience of Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat podcast. I didn't even mention on that show Joe Rogan, just Fertitta's mentioned in a published book and something boring like the SNL crisis and Galveston connections. Probably stupid on my part. But Tripoli still had this to say on a later podcast.
You want to rub elbows with successful people. You have to vibrate with them. And I've seen it before. Now, someone like me, I'm like I can go back and forth. I'm like Blade, right? I'm like a day walker. I can go vibe with these super hot, and I love to go and hang out, like walking around Hollywood Boulevard and just watching the weirdos. Like I love that. But I also can go into where these extreme like I remember one time I was out with Joe Rogan back when I used to tour with him, and I sat next to the owners of the UFC, which were how do you pronounce their name?
I can't remember.
Yeah, they're like the billionaire brothers. Yeah. I want to say fajitas, but that's a Mexican dish, not two brothers. But and I sat next to them. Fertitta. And I sat next to them, and I felt their vibrations, and I'm like, these guys vibrate on another level. It's like whenever you go to San Diego, you'll do La Jolla, and these like super rich people come. They want to slum with the comics and hang out. They vibrate different. There's a different vibration. And then you hang out and you're walking down the street and that person's on drugs. Their vibration is different. And you attract your vibration.
I'll tell the government right now, tell you right now if you're listening, NSA, CIA, I'm available, okay? If you show me all the real wreckage, I swear to God, I will make fun of that crap to the end of time. I'll make up stories, I'll lie to my mother. I swear to God, I will make fun of that crap to the end of time. I'll make up stories. I'll lie to my mother.
So after all I've detailed here, with as little detail as possible to make this video brief, I'll let you decide on where the faction lines lie. Figures such as Donald Trump, Dana White, the Fertitta family, the NBA, the Joe Rogan experience, restaurant chains, casinos, Hollywood. What aspects of daily life truly reflect your own agency rather than external influence? To what extent might elements of your own worldview or personality have been carefully cultivated? Therefore, I'm not voting for Kamala or Trump. There's plenty of connections between them both I could endlessly talk about and point out contradictions with readily available information, but I find people seek out what they want to hear. Perhaps I'm subject to that too, but hopefully I succeeded in at least trying to examine and explain the contradictions I have with this whole cultural process and the figures that dominate it. And hopefully I've laid out the gravity of the situation we are dealing with here. A war for the mind of man. Nullius in verba.